Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a powerful idea that runs completely counter to everything modern hustle culture tells us. It's this ancient law that suggests the secret to real, lasting power isn't about pushing harder. It's actually about finding a totally different kind of strength.
This piece of ancient wisdom points to a simple, fundamental truth about the world. In nature, anything that's super intense is, by definition, brief. A hurricane eventually fades out. A flash flood recedes. It's a powerful reminder that brute force just has a really short shelf life, a lesson we seem to forget all the time.
And this is really where it gets personal, right? Our whole culture celebrates explosive growth, nonstop effort, go, go, go. But think about it. If nature itself can't sustain that level of intensity, why on earth do we think we can? Is this permanent storm we're trying to live in, is it really working for us?
And we see this boom and bust cycle, this storm cycle, everywhere. We glorify the 80-hour work week, but what's the inevitable result? Mass burnout and this whole quiet quitting phenomenon. We get totally swept up in crypto hype, and then we watch spectacular collapses like FTX. Even viral outrage on social media. It burns incredibly hot for a minute, and then, poof, it's gone as we all move on to the next thing. The storm always passes.
So this constant cycle of intensity followed by exhaustion, it's not random. It's actually governed by a pretty fundamental principle. And while we might call all our frantic efforts the law of the storm, the truth is, we're pushing up against a much deeper, much more powerful law of nature.
And that's the law of natural rhythms. It's this simple but honestly profound idea that you just can't force things forever. Pushing, shouting, hustling nonstop, it will always burn itself out. Real, sustainable power doesn't come from fighting the current, it comes from learning how to flow with it.
I mean, this question just puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? The planet itself, which is the most powerful system we know, operates in cycles. You've got seasons, tides, day and night. If the Earth itself can't maintain a state of constant extremity, what makes us think we're the exception?
So this leaves us with a really fundamental choice in pretty much everything we do. We can either try to align with these natural rhythms, or we can try to fight them. To really see what this looks like in the real world, let's check out the stories of two very different companies. Okay, on one side, you've got a company like Trader Joe's. They didn't try to reinvent the grocery store or create some massive hype machine. They just focused on what their customers actually wanted: good food, fair prices. They aligned with a real need, and their growth was just organic. It was natural. Then on the other side, you have WeWork. They tried to force a reality that wasn't there with this growth at all costs mantra fueled by pure hype. And when that force ran out of steam, the whole thing just imploded.
You see, these stories really show us there are three distinct paths. The first is what Trader Joe's did, aligning with flow, with real principles and needs. And that just naturally attracts opportunities. The second path is aligning with integrity, like Patagonia does. They focus on fair practices. And what do they get? This incredible, unshakable trust and loyalty from their customers. And then there's the third path, the path of ego, of shortcuts. And as WeWork showed us, that path only attracts chaos and eventually collapse. Where you put your focus really does determine what you get back.
Okay, so how do we actually escape this exhausting cycle of always pushing too hard? This isn't just some abstract philosophy. There are some really practical, specific things you can do to start working with nature instead of constantly fighting it.
First, try replacing push with pulse. Instead of a constant grind, work in focused, high-intensity sprints, maybe for 90 minutes, and then take a real break. Second, practice what you might call strategic silence. Next time you're in a negotiation, try just not talking so much. Listen more. You'll be amazed at the leverage you gain. Third, let systems self-correct. Don't feel like you have to jump in and fix every little problem or market dip. Sometimes, if you just create space, things resolve themselves. And finally, audit your own energy. Pay attention to what feels forced and draining in your life, and then have the courage to actually cut it. Whether you choose that path of flow or the path of force, they both have an ultimate consequence. And it all boils down to the one currency that really underpins any kind of lasting success.
It's trust. When you try to force outcomes, when you overhype your promises, when you take shortcuts, you are spending your most valuable asset. And once that trust is gone, all that's left is doubt and skepticism and resistance. You simply cannot force someone to trust you.
And just look at the long-term stakes here. You have Warren Buffett, who built his fortune over decades through patient alignment with solid market principles. He let the rhythm do the work. And then, in stark contrast, you have Theranos, which forced a narrative built on pure hype and deception. The second that trust collapsed, their $9 billion valuation went straight to zero. Patience builds fortunes, force builds ruins.
So this brings us to the final and most essential question. In every project we start, every conversation we have, every single day, we're making a choice between these two fundamental ways of being: flow or force. So I think the key takeaway today is this: real lasting power isn't loud, it's not flashy, it's not forceful. It's quiet, it's aligned, and it resonates. When you finally stop fighting the current and instead learn to match nature's rhythm, your calm, steady focus becomes a far more powerful and truly unstoppable force than any temporary storm could ever be.
So the next time you feel that pressure, when the world is screaming at you to push harder, just ask yourself this: is your greatest strength in that moment really to force the outcome? Or could it be to pause and find the flow?